Sometimes some crimes go slipping through the cracks. I forget the rest, but just squirrels a This is Squirrel King, released in 1995 for the Sega Mega Drive courtesy of Gamtech, and this is a pirate original made to resemble a 16-bit version of the Chip 'n Dale Rescue Ranger games that appeared on the Nintendo Entertainment System, or at least the first game. There's also a Super Nintendo version of this simply called Squirrel that's only one player and far worse, but I've not touched that one and I don't think I want to either. Anyway, Squirrel King is perhaps better known among those who dabble in the evil art of emulation once upon a time as the basis for a rather notorious Super Mario Bros. Pirate game on the Mega Drive, where you controlled a rather large Mario in levels ripped straight from Super Mario All-Stars before all pretense of this being a Mario game is dropped a few stages later. Anyway, you start the game where you're given the choice to play as either Chip or Dale. Yes, they are labeled as such, yes, they do resemble the characters somewhat save for some minor color changes, and yes, they both play exactly the same. Since I presume there is two-player support here, which I've not tested or looked up for that matter. Not that it really matters anyway. So the general idea is that you move to the right, no backtracking. You pick up crates or boxes or whatever and you throw them at enemies. You could even throw upwards. Crates will sometimes hide items such as health pickups or green fists that will give you a fireball shot to toss at foes, of which you start with 3 shots and can carry up to 9. If you crouch while holding a crate, you could actually hide inside the crate, which can protect you from harm. A rather nice move to take advantage of at times. You have 7 acts to play through, with the first act being a virtual recreation of the first level from the first Rescue Rangers game on NES. All the rest are what I presume to be original levels Do Not Steal that are divided up into 3 segments apiece, upon which the end of the third segment is where you will encounter the stage boss, whom you'll need to defeat in order to move on to the next stage, obviously. This entails picking up boxes that the game drops your way to toss at the boss. Assuming this mechanic works in the first place, because there were times where I found myself waiting for a box to show up and it never did until I lost a life and then it would start spawning boxes again. Others have claimed that bosses will disappear from sight and render the game effectively over, though I've not encountered that scenario myself, thankfully. Squirrel King is one of those rare pirate originals that actually come across as competently executed and somewhat functional. Control is generally responsive for the most part and pretty easy to figure out. The gameplay in general, while not entirely original, is still pretty solid and does a fine enough job of emulating that Rescue Rangers gameplay. The level design is somewhat straightforward at times, the difficulty is generally modest at best, and save for a couple minor glitches that don't often rear their ugly heads, the overall experience is just fine. You begin a new game with 4 lives and 5 continues, and every 100 jewels collected will net you an extra life unless you're playing the 2-player mode, in which case you gain a 1-up every 50 jewels collected. Strangely enough, the game has no on-screen counter of how many jewels you collected, so the only way you'd know you got 100 jewels is an audio cue and a lives counter going up by 1, and that's about it. Squirrel King's generally not a bad looking game. If nothing else, the character sprites look somewhat decent, whether it's the standard sized characters like your playable Squirrel Kings, or the giant boss characters and their somewhat limited animation. The backdrops are fairly average looking fare and probably not all that exciting to venture through, but on a whole, it doesn't look like hot garbage, which again is high praise for a pirate original. While the gameplay and some of the character designs are ripped from Rescue Rangers, the music is ripped from other places. One track seems to be based on Donkey Kong and is probably the only real track in the game. Another track is seemingly ripped from The Lion King, and I'm sure the rest of the music in this is also stolen or ripped off or just plain bad. Sound effects are minimal and kinda rubbish, nothing else to say there. As far as the Mario World hack that would spawn from this game is concerned, you have a rendition of the Super Mario theme that's been featured in some other pirate Mario game on the Mega Drive, and the first 2 acts are ripped from the All-Stars version of Super Mario 1. Other than that, there's nothing here that you can't already find in Squirrel King, save for the Mario stuff. It's the same shit anyway, so what does it matter really? Overall, Squirrel King on the Mega Drive is a perfectly competent, perfectly acceptable Rescue Rangers knockoff thing that makes me wish I was playing Rescue Rangers instead. And I really do need to get around to that one of these days. Unless you're playing the hacked version with Super Mario, in which case, that version makes me wish I was playing a proper Super Mario game instead. To its credit though, Squirrel King is one of the more playable pirate originals on the Mega Drive that I've come across, and there is some mild enjoyment to be had here if you could put up with its quirks or unoriginality, But otherwise, if you go through life never bowing down to the king of squirrels, you're not missing out on much anyway. Still, as far as pirate offerings are concerned, this one's okay.